All right, I get the joy of introducing our next presenter, who is Anna Novalany. Anna is the outreach naturalist at Carpenter Nature Center, and she's been a member of our team for almost a year. She received her Bachelor of Science from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities in Environmental Science, Policy, and Management in 2023. Her love for birds developed while working at Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center as an animal care intern, working closely with their ambassador animals and at their MAPS banding station. Her most recent position was as a wildlife fieldwork technician at Dakota County, where she spent most of her time in Dakota County parks and analyzing volunteer survey data. Anna will be sharing about a Dakota County hotspot, Miesville Ravine. And I'll just throw out that we apologize to Dakota County for kidnapping Anna and adding her to the Carpenter team. We're thrilled to have her, and fortunately, the Dakota County staff still speak to us because we stole Anna from them. So take it away, Anna.
Perfect. Can everyone see my screen right now? The thumbs up. Okay, I'm not hearing anything contrary. So, first of all, I apologize. I'm fighting a sickness right now, so I'm sorry if I sound terrible. And if if I kind of rush through everything, hopefully I'll remember everything I wanted to say. But yes, my name's Anna. I work at Carpenter now, but I used to spend a lot of time in the Dakota County parks, and one that we often would talk about kind of as just like our special little gem was Miesville Ravine. That is often not really one that is known by people in the metro area. A lot of people have their kind of birding hotspots. Maybe some of I was looking through the list of the attendees today, and I have seen some of your names on the eBird data for Miesville. So some of you may be familiar with this park, but this park is really just very um, diverse when it comes to its bird species, and was kind of how I got into birding, how I kind of honed my skills of identification visually and audibly. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what makes this park so amazing and some of the birds that we can find in there and how you could potentially get involved going out to Miesville and birding there. So uh, here we go. So Miesville Ravine has actually been around since the 70s. I had to double check with my old boss at Dakota County for this. But it has kind of expanded over that time. They've been able to kind of acquire new land from homeowners who sold to the county. So it has expanded. But really, what it was before was a partial agricultural field that was formerly a remnant prairie. So there's over 1,600 acres now in modern Miesville Ravine, but there's only about 2 miles of hiking trails. So if you look at like the map that I have on here, that kind of southern end is really the only like accessible for the public who maybe just want to go take their dog on a walk or just go to a park for a day. So there isn't a whole ton of presence by people there, which also might make it very attractive for some of these kind of more obscure bird species. But another part that makes Miesville so unique is because the Cannon River runs right along the edge. So kind of over by where those hiking trails are. The Cannon River attracts a lot of really awesome waterfowl and bird species too. And an offshoot of the Cannon River is this trout brook that goes all throughout the park, where a lot of trout fishermen will come. And there's actually multiple springs that have been found in this trout brook, supplying the trout with cold water. So that could also be a really attractive part about this park to many species. And also just there is a very diverse habitat makeup. So obviously Miesville Ravine, there's going to be ravines there, but right up on top of those ravines is this beautiful prairie bluff that was that remnant prairie, along with sedge meadows, some oak savannas, and then various mixed woods. So it is pretty all over the place when it comes to habitat, which means that, you know, we're going to be getting a lot of different bird species at this park when we go and visit. Um, So why this park? Other than, what we kind of talked about with habitat makeup and maybe that trout brook, this park has a lot of amazing things about it. First of all, very quiet. There's just those two main trailheads on that south end of the park, but when you kind of the rest of the park is kind of almost free range. Like you don't have trails that you necessarily are bound to. And Also, there's just a lot of biodiversity in there, not even just in birds. There is a species of trout lily called the dwarf trout lily that is endemic to this area. I think you can only find it in 4 counties in Minnesota, and that's the only place you can find it in the world. So. This is a park that can support these very sensitive species. But also, when I was working at Dakota County, I had the pleasure of being the person that would look through our trail camera photos. So I would be flipping through all day, and once in a while we'd get some gems. So I included a really fun one in the top left corner of a belted kingfisher flying past the camera, and then that is a beaver dam behind him. So we found this beaver dam that is an active beaver dam in the park, and we put up a trail camera right next to there, and it was honestly surprising how many birds we were getting around there too. Like the herons were attracted there, the kingfishers. There's some photos of wood ducks with their chicks swimming in this kind of like more stagnant water now. So it was incredible just seeing all the other animals that were attracted to there. There's also the cool barred owl landing on the rock. There's some of the subsequent photos after this of her eating whatever she had caught as a meal. But then we also get some cool mammals too. So bobcats, like in the bottom left, that was you can see that was back in 2023. But a little bit more recently, we have fisher in that park. Uh, and a lot of Dakota County parks have been able to kind of monitor these fisher populations through a partnership with University of Minnesota Duluth. So the fisher have been around for a while there. But also, not only is it very biodiverse, but a lot of the species are, especially for birds, are pretty abundant. Not even just of a certain species, just in general, when you're going there, you're just going to be hearing or seeing a lot of birds. So I crunched the numbers using the Dakota County survey data. And if you go out there for like maybe an hour or two, you're probably going to see like 132 individual birds. Maybe it's 132 chickadees, who knows? But during that period, 132 birds was kind of that average number that we were getting. So a lot of different species, a lot of birds, a lot of mammals. I did want to include a really cute video of a beaver swimming away. Oh, there we go. So that's that same beaver dam that we saw that belted kingfisher at. And then there's another one down at the end. But these beavers were active and very, very fun to watch slowly build their dam and fix it over time. So when I was working at the county, one of my main jobs was to help facilitate the breeding bird survey, which was a survey that we conducted with volunteers since 2018 in all of our parks. But while we were looking at all of the data, I was constantly seeing that really the most birds that we were seeing, some of the coolest, most interesting species, were all coming from Miesville. So it was just people were seeing more birds, people were seeing more interesting birds, hearing them, and it was always Miesville that would just have the most. So this map is kind of showing all of these different points that volunteers have surveyed over the time. So some of these points are transects, meaning that they're walking, from point to point and surveying during that period. But all these areas have been consistent over time, and some years not all of them have been surveyed, but it was pretty consistent, these points. So people were surveying them between 5:30 and 9 a.m. Twice once in June and once in July, at the same point. So they would kind of get a route. They would go out there at their chosen day, as long as it was once in June, once in July, and kind of go out in between, usually those 2 times. And we kind of split it up to 3 different survey routes. So it's more of that top section up here, this kind of middle section where there's a little bit of woods and prairie, and then kind of the southern section that was more the picnic area and the more established trails. So those 3 routes have been surveyed pretty consistently by the same volunteers over these last what is it now, 8 years. So it was usually the same person that was going out there and collecting the data too. So when we're looking at the survey data over these years, there's some really awesome species that we can be seeing through that data. First of all, there was 15 species of greatest conservation need, 3 species of special concern, and 1 endangered species. But total throughout those times, there's a total of 93 species that have been confirmed, been there throughout those surveys. So I have a few of the photos. So we've got our yellow-billed cuckoo, the American woodcock, and of course our wood thrush. So wood thrush, we've done some of our, at Carpenter, we've done some of our wood thrush surveys at Miesville as well, catching them there. And they're pretty regularly coming back. But here are some of kind of the more notable ones that I've noticed throughout the years, and a lot of them, as you can see throughout these the years timestamps that I put down, have been pretty regular residents at Miesville. So the purple martin is a special concern species and has been seen, 5 years over the time. I remember when I went out there on a breeding bird survey with a much more experienced birder than me, who can, remember all of the calls. We heard one of the purple martins. Henslow's sparrow, which is an endangered species here in Minnesota, has been here, I think, nearly every year since the survey started. So this habitat is really, really important for this species. I also got the opportunity to hear one of them as well up on the prairie bluff. Lark sparrows, again, special concern species. They've been here for pretty much every single year. And then an Acadian flycatcher, which we don't usually get, but for the past 2 years of surveying, they have been returning to the parks. So all of this data has been collected through the breeding bird survey through Dakota County, but I understand that's not all of the data that we are going to be following, just when we're collecting data for anything. So I also looked at eBird to see what people said, but I tried to kind of narrow it down to the species that were either, mentioned a lot of times by many different volunteers that went out there. They had some sort of photo or audio proof just to make sure that these species not only were there, but the confirmation of the time that they were there as well. So I think this probably isn't all encompassing. There was a few different kind of hotspot points at Miesville on eBird, but 188 species listed was the number that was the highest that was given. So that's about twice as many as the survey data has included. But we noticed that that lower picnic area where all of those kind of main trails were not as diverse as, like some of those mixed woods or the remnant prairie up on top were, which isn't too surprising. But when I say lower level of diversity in Miesville, it just means that, maybe not those kind of one in a few years species were seen there, but you were still getting very, very diverse populations and some really cool birds down there too. It was just noticeably less than some other spots. But on eBird, some of the really cool species that I saw that were confirmed there were the black-billed cuckoo, greatest conservation needs species that was seen in 2024. The Louisiana or northern water thrush, which is a special concern species, seems like it's been coming back a few years now. That was also noted by a few different birders in the area. Cerulean warblers have been noted there, which is a special concern species. And then I added the Blackburnian warbler, which has been seen by a few different people over a few years, not because they're in any need or anything, but because they're my favorite warbler. They're one of the coolest to me. So it is exciting knowing that there's a spot where we can, potentially find some of these species that maybe we wouldn't normally be seeing. So I feel like I've been talking super fast. Feel free to ask a bunch of questions after this. But really, this last piece is just kind of like, how can you get involved? Like, if you're interested in seeing maybe some of these species that we don't see a whole bunch, what's the process about getting to Miesville? How does it work? Miesville, I do have to say, is kind of more of like an off the beaten path park, which maybe explains why there's so many really awesome species there. But it is kind of a little bit in the middle of nowhere. So Miesville is on the very southern end of Dakota County. So right across that Cannon River that you see on this map, that's Goodhue County. And it's kind of completely surrounded by farm fields. There's not a whole ton of cell service there, and there's currently, as it is, there's no potable water. There's vault toilets, but there's no drinking water that you can have there. But it is a free park and it's open dawn to dusk. I would just say if you're going to be, going up to those bluffs or into those more rural areas of the park, then maybe just bring a friend with you or let people know that you're there. There are some really steep ravines, so we want to like make sure that you're staying safe, especially with maybe not as much cell service to call somebody if you did need help. But also to kind of give you some more information about the breeding bird survey that Dakota County has. Now, when we go, like, if we're interested in birding, we can go out to a park and bird wherever we want to. But the really awesome thing about the breeding bird survey is kind of those consistent points and transects that they're sampling over the years, so that we are getting really consistent data at consistent locations. So that is if you're interested in maybe helping out with a local bird survey, you can reach out to Scott Hagen, who's a natural resource specialist at Dakota County. We just ask that you are pretty confident on your visual ID of birds and also your audio ID of birds. Be able to know a lot of bird calls, at least the local ones. But like I said kind of earlier in my presentation, that it is a point transect survey conducted twice, so once in June and once in July. And it is like an early morning, so you're going to get there at like 6 a.m. And then go until you've completed all of your points. So it usually only takes a few hours. But if Miesville sounds really cool, but it's kind of far away from where you live, they also have breeding bird surveys at all of their other parks. So Lake Billsby, which is just to the west of Miesville and Cannon Falls, also has some really cool birds over there. I think 2 years ago, one of the volunteers saw a short-eared owl soar right in front of him. So that's a pretty cool spot for that. Lebanon Hills in Egan, surprisingly, has a lot of different bird species, even for just being, almost right in the middle of the city. And I think it's just because of the total amount of land that encompasses. But then also Whitetail Woods Regional Park. That is a really cool one if you want to see some really awesome waterfowl or marsh birds. They love that park just because it's very marshy. And the final thing was that while I was doing this presentation, I haven't really been down to Miesville in a while since I haven't worked at Dakota County. But when I was doing my research for this presentation, I saw that they are officially adding kind of more infrastructure to that southern end of the park where there's all of those trails. So it looks like they're going to be actually making, real toilets, not just boat toilets, running water, boat launches, an improved picnic area, all of these kinds of things. So they're closing all of those main trails on the southern end of the park for the next kind of few months, which again, like I mentioned, it's not really the main hotspot when it comes to birding here in Miesville, but it is still interesting to kind of consider maybe how putting in this more permanent infrastructure might affect these bird populations. And if Dakota County is going to be seeing any major differences in what they have been seeing as far as species in the future. So Yeah, if you have any more questions about the park, Miesville, or any other Dakota County parks, I have been mulling over the breeding bird survey data for quite a while now, so I can usually answer most of your questions. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Do we have any questions in the chat? Oh, yep. I see somebody mentioned that the parking lots are closed. Yep. So on that south end, there's two main parking lots, kind of where that yellow construction area is. But if you still want to bird in the park and you want to avoid the construction, if you go on the north side of the park, there is here. Let me go back to, maybe this is the best. There is a road that goes through the park. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but there's a road that goes through the park on the north end. And right off of that, there is kind of a pull off that you can park at. A lot of trout fishermen tend to use that entrance to get to Trout Brook to get to their fishing locations. But that's a place that you can park where you're not really in the construction zone, but you can still get to kind of some of these more like birding hotspots up on the ravine or in kind of more of the forested areas by the brook. So I would recommend, if you were interested, to maybe park on that end of the park until I think November was when the construction was going to be done. But I also think that's just kind of the best place to be birding anyways. And I would recommend going there even if the parking lot on the south end ends up being open. Um, Yeah, the Blackburnian warblers. I love the Blackburnian warblers. We would get some when up at Wolf Ridge on the North Shore at Sugarloaf too. Um, but I don't really see them too much down on this kind of southern end of the park. And also one other cool thing I forgot to mention is that Miesville has some pretty consistent nesting ravens there, and I think they're one of the southernmost breeding nesting pair of ravens in the state of Minnesota. So pretty cool that they keep coming back to this park, and they're always fun to hear.
So Anna, in keeping with our theme today, what was your spark bird? What got you into birding back whenever?
I love being asked this question, so thank you for asking me it. My spark bird was actually the sandhill crane, and the reason for that was when I was in high school. Andy Weaver, if some of you are in this from the Stillwater area, was my environmental science teacher in high school, and he brought us out to see the nesting sandhill cranes in our kind of our ELC behind the school, and I got to see one of their chicks. And it kind of was just like, it was just it blew my mind just seeing these really awesome birds, and also hearing their calls was just like so alien. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. So for sure, what made me kind of think about reconsidering my path in life and maybe going into something related to birds or even just environmental education. So very awesome birds.
And then as we get ready to welcome Annie, are there any suggestions you have for new birders? Somebody who maybe had a cool biology teacher like Mr. Weaver and thinks birds are pretty cool, they're bird curious. Do you have any advice?
Um, Really, it's just kind of like go out there and experience it. Am kind of, I feel like a lot of times, especially like a lot of these surveys, it's very much like point. So you're like sitting in one spot for a very long time and just sitting and waiting and seeing what comes to you. I'm kind of like a bird hiker where it's like I'm birding while I'm also moving. So if you're, already, out walking your dog or walking with friends or biking, you can still, keep your ears open, keep your eyes open, and look around. It doesn't have to be, your main focus even. And that could even just kind of give you a little bit more of a familiarity of the birds in your area. So that's kind of what got me into, being more familiar with the species around us, and also learning some of their calls too.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Anna.
Mhm.
And if anybody has questions for Anna, pop them in the chat and she'll text an answer or message an answer to you.